Well, good morning, everybody. It's wonderful to be with you. I have not attended a GEOINT Foreword before. I'm so excited. This is actually the group that is thinking about the future, and I think the socialites may be coming for the conference later in the week, but we're so delighted to be with you today to discuss this very important set of topics, and this conversation, I can't tell you, we could not have found a better cross-disciplinary, multi-domain panel of experts than we have here today with you. It's a joy to be with you. Rather than give you the details of their bios, which are all available to you if you have your USGIF itinerary, and I can just share with you that as we do these introductions, you'll get a sense that the USGIF was interested in the deeper understanding that's necessary in the age of artificial intelligence to help understand what the meaning of that is for human tradecraft and for the protection of our values and intelligence. So it's a real pleasure to be with you today. I'd like to just briefly share with you the process for today's 45-minute panel. We'll have a few introductory remarks. Really, I've asked our panelists with deep expertise, as I mentioned, both in intelligence and in the technology, artificial intelligence technologies, but also in the social sciences. I'll let you guess who each of these leaders are as they do their introductions. But I've asked them to share a few thoughts which potentially will provoke all of us to be thinking about during the conference as we think about human and machine teaming, and how our tradecraft has to evolve, and what both the perils and potential benefits of that is for us as we look ahead against our near peer and peer rivals. So without further ado, let me ask Kasim if you'll start with some introductory thoughts for our audience, and we'll get into a great discussion. I understand questions may be coming up. I'll try and intersperse that as we get kind of the introductory thoughts around this rich topic out from each of our panelists. We'll pull on some of those threads and let them share with you their thinking to help your understanding and our understanding of what's coming with artificial intelligence and human and machine teaming.
Thank you, Bill, and good morning, everyone. And my name is Qasim Abdullah. I'm Vice President and Chief Scientist for Woopert, and I teach at Penn State and University of Maryland, Baltimore County, several topics on geospatial mapping and drones. And so my involvement with the industry for the last 40 years, I wear different hats between academia and development, research and development, and involved in the industry through my position as a chief scientist with Woopert. So the topic, when you look at it, metaphor and algorithm, a lot of people get confused, including me, when I heard about it at the beginning. But really is very important, like Balance said, a very important topic, because we can work all day and develop algorithm, but without conveying that algorithm, the use of it, the value of it, to the user, it might fall short. It will be shelved for a while and nobody use it. So in our business, the best example I bring as a metaphor, if you're questioning what metaphor and algorithm, is the map and map-like visualization in our industry. Because when you look at the natural scene of terrain and environment, it is very overwhelming for the brain to convey it on a paper or on the screen. So the map came as a rescue for us, the GIS, the portal now, the web portal, those all to take very complex, multidimensional data, whether spatial or non-spatial, and convey it to the user in a simple way to understand that environment. So that's my take on the metaphor in the geospatial business.
Wonderful, Qasim. Well, we'll get into that discussion a little bit as we get everybody's initial thoughts. Rennie, welcome to the stage, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you. And I think that was a wonderful introduction, Qasim. I think you're reminding us that maps are a pattern of abstract symbols that represent something on the ground. Algorithms are a pattern of rules that are used to solve for what. But we find ourselves asking, where's the meaning? Metaphors are patterns of language, of speech, that organize thoughts and ideas between people, but sometimes we ask, where's the substance? Where's the what? Well, I'd like to propose today that location grounds these things. If you'll excuse the use of a metaphor, you'll find that spatial metaphors are actually littered throughout our speech. Location grounds algorithm and metaphor. And one example is if you will just consider with me the discovery of something, the discovery of a road grader moving along a road. Now, by itself, you can imagine a large piece of equipment, something scraping the ground, changing the earth. But now what? Next, look at location. Where is this occurring? If this is happening in Woodstock, Vermont, for example, a series of ideas could come into your head. Well, Woodstock hasn't grown in 200 years. Why is there a road grader in Woodstock, Vermont? Is there a community expansion? Is there a new business being built? Well, that leads you to one series of questions. However, if you notice this observation of road grading at a different location on the Earth, say, for example, Lopnor, China, at China's nuclear weapons proving ground, well, you're led down a very different set of questions and meanings and ideas. Now, in each case, whatever location you're looking at, you want to consider then that place's history and culture and language. And indeed, history and culture and language entail location implicitly. Histories are about events at different locations, and histories differ in different places on the Earth. Likewise, culture. The reason that culture matters is because different cultures at different places of the Earth are different from others. And so noticing and accounting for and being sensitive to these differences are essential to what we do. I'll end by talking about how we find meaning. Well, there's no one answer for that, but I'll give an anecdote. When I was working for government as an imagery analyst, I had my supervisor one day in a very friendly conversation say, you know, you don't need language training to be an image analyst and to do good imagery analysis work. Now, he was speaking this to somebody who had just spent years in China studying Chinese language, learning how to read and write it, and he said this, and I thought, I don't agree. And in fact, 6 months later, we proved that actually language could be applied to something like imagery analysis, and it could advance a topic of interest that was essential to US national security. So the point of this anecdote is we don't always know where connections are going to be made. We don't always know where meaning can be found. We should keep an open mind about that and allow for human intuition and human creativity to be part of the teams of people that we bring together. Different backgrounds working together, not knowing exactly where the answer might come from, but allowing for the possibility of multiple answers.
Rennie, thank you. That's a beautiful segue to one of our senior intelligence officers who's on the panel with us to help us understand how humans contextualize and understand the world around us. Matt?
Thanks, Bolin. I'm going to try to pile on to my colleagues so far. And it's nice to be with you, I guess it's still this morning. My training is in economics, extracting relevance from data, numbers. And then I worked for 10 years at CIA, my first 10 years as an economic analyst, working macroeconomic stuff and international financial flows. Again, trying to extract relevance out of data and numbers. My last job at CIA was as an assistant director. I headed something called the Global Issues Mission Center, which, several of its 20 missions was strategic resource flows. So everything from food to energy. We also worked narcotics. So narcotics flows headed north to America. Again, trying to extract relevance from data and numbers. Meanwhile, about 12 years ago, I crossed paths with a strategic culturist who had been mentored by Colin Gray. And those of you well-read on strategy know he's at or near the top, or was, passed not too long ago, on strategic culture. And strategic culturists, in addition to looking at foreign strategic cultures, they turn their expertise onto their own countries, in this case, America. And one of the themes that we may come back to is Americans have a very strong cultural orientation toward things that are accountable. numbers and data. And a close cousin to that is a fascination. We value technology greatly. I'm going to share just a quick anecdote. This is merely amusing, but it gets at something that I may return to. I have 3 more examples that are not just anecdotal and not merely amusing. But my colleague, my strategic cultures colleague, has reminded me on a number of occasions that this American orientation manifests itself when Americans visit the Washington Monument for the first time. And almost to a person, their first question is, how tall is it? And their second question is, how many steps does it have? When French visitors visit the Washington Monument, almost all of them take a quick look and say, why the hell an Egyptian obelisk for George Washington? There's some distance between those. We're just talking 2 strategic cultures, just an anecdote. But I'm hoping we can come back and peel that back a little bit more, get some more of the significant impact of all of that as the panel proceeds. So I'll beg off at that point.
Thank you very much, Matt. That helps us already appreciate that artificial intelligence may not be the sole answer to all of the queries in the world. Bobby, you've got a rich history here at NGA. It must be wonderful for you to be back among your colleagues, a senior executive with NGA for many years, and would love to hear your thoughts as this, what seems like a new environment is unfolding for our tradecraft, but some history on this.
Right. So out in the audience are a lot of people who remember when I was an NGA employee, but you know, guys, that's 16 and a half years ago. I retired here as the senior executive of NGA West, but I also started here in the mid-70s when it was Defense Mapping Agency, the Aerospace Center. And that wasn't my first interest in mapping. So I'm one of those kids who grew up in an era when you could go to the corner filling station and you could get a map of your state, a map of some other states, and I could use those to visualize trips that I would likely never take. And it made me, following kind of on what Qasim had to say about the map as a perfect metaphor, it made me think about maps. And metaphorically, the whole issue of navigation, which is what we do in our everyday thinking. So the human perspective of navigation as we go from how we're going to start the day, what do we have to do, when does it have to be done? Think about that in terms of maps. So whether you've used paper maps or you are exclusively wedded to digital maps, you're interested in a location. So there's where you are right now or a location that you might want to visit, but you're also interested in the many facets about how do you get there, how do you navigate between this point and that point, between this time and that time. And that navigation is all about the context. It's about all the pieces that are there. So that map sheet, you've got that pretty well specified. You can see what's on the map sheet. It's when you add that wealth of the other information that we now have become more and more incorporated into the things that we call artificial intelligence and machine learning. As the discussion goes on today, I want you all to keep in mind that artificial intelligence as a discipline is not something that's brand new. Now, I've been around long enough to know that when Defense Mapping Agency had its long-term training program, now known as its vector training, that in the 80s, we were sending individuals for artificial intelligence graduate work to MIT. So there's been a long progression. And as the discussion goes on this morning, and hopefully some of the questions from the audience, we'll be able to kind of fill in some of the pieces as that technology has advanced at the same time as the demand for human intelligence has also increased.
Well, that's a very comforting note to begin the discussion on, that potentially this isn't as new and as transformative. Looking back in history, Bobby, if I understand you correctly, we've been looking at this advent of artificial intelligence for some time, but I want to get into a couple of the themes that I heard our panelists mention, and I welcome your insights for the audience. First is, it sounds like at least a couple of you believe that the cultural and societal implications really give the human operator and analyst a chance to contextualize at a much higher level. I'd like to ask you about bias, and I wonder if any of the panelists would like to comment on the concerns that you sometimes hear emerging from artificial intelligence, that it either reinforces bias, but also maybe the difference between intuition that an operator or analyst might have because they're an expert potentially on China or other areas, and how we think about human tradecraft evolving now that we know artificial intelligence can do some of the triaging in massive amounts of data. Are there any concerns on any part of the panelists about what that might mean? Are there kind of both potential and peril there? And I wonder if, Matt, if you would maybe start and come to Rennie.
And I should have punctuated, my journey into the data continues. At Space Dynamics Lab, I'm surrounded by really smart engineers and scientists who are steeped in the tools of AI and ML, and we as an organization, sensor satellites are wrestling with bringing in these other strands. Let me offer an example of bias from history, a costly one. So, make this quick. As we are all aware, the United States has occupied Iraq twice. After the first occupation, we got some additional intel on the state of Saddam Hussein's WMD. And we found out that he was further along than we had initially assessed. And we had seen some patterns of behavior as premises that led to conclusions we made based on how Saddam and his guys were operating in that WMD weapons inspection realm. Fast forward, we have 9/11, and we have some policymakers who quickly concluded there was some risk of Saddam Hussein and Osama bin Laden collaborating. And meanwhile, we had seen some patterns of behavior by Saddam and some of his guys that sure looked a lot like it looked back in 1990, 1989, before we went into 91. Cognitive bias. We had drawn a conclusion. That behavior leads to the conclusion that they are pursuing WMD. And we were wrong. And part of the issue was we never asked this question. How could those same premises that we saw before lead to a very different conclusion? We didn't ask that question. One of the reasons we didn't is there are a lot of reasons, and people are debating this still today. People are probably still getting their dissertations on this topic. We didn't have a sufficiently diverse set of minds and backgrounds and disciplines in the room working that. So I want to end this thought, but at the Center for Anticipatory Intelligence at Utah State University, which I helped co-found with that strategic culturist, Jeannie Johnson, I mentioned, we systematically and aggressively approach multi-domain orientation to all problem sets that we can imagine. So in any given classroom, we've got 35 majors, from AI, ML experts to cultural anthropologists to folks who are going to become bankers. And the impact, the richness of the problem solving helps address the bias issue.
Sure. Well, I appreciate that, Matt. So if I could summarize, I think what you said is the concern we have potentially about artificial intelligence triaging spectacular amounts of data is that it could lead to increased cognitive bias unless, if I understand you correctly, we approach all of that data with a healthy skepticism and look at it from different angles. I wonder, Rennie, if you have a comment about intuition and about how people come to conclusions, how humans can both accelerate and elevate their understanding when we have now these artificial intelligence applications that can dangerously sometimes point us down a direction that we may be anticipating from previous experience, but may not be the right direction for our understanding.
Sure. And I would start by saying it's not the perspective that is wrong to begin with. It's that the perspective ends without getting shared and sussed out in a community in a transparent way. And so to try and prove a case, to say, I think this, and to try and prove that case isn't in itself wrong to do. It's that becomes the end of the process, and it's not pulled further. It's not shared among a group of people transparently. It's not pulled out in a broader community. Same is true for AI ML applications. The tools aren't good or bad. What we should do is take them and use them as tools and then work with them together in a community in a transparent way to lift things up so that as many people as possible can see them from as many different backgrounds as possible to try and assess what is meaningful. And so we run into this a lot in social science when if you're doing case studies, well, if you're just trying to prove one case, you're selecting on the dependent variable. You're just looking for cases that fit what your question is. Well, that's okay to an extent, but it's part of a longer process. You should be developing that further. Try and prove a case, but then once you think you've gotten to a certain point, develop it further, lift it out of a small group of people, bring it out into the community for as many people as possible to give their reactions to it and their opinions to it.
Great, that's very helpful and very thoughtful. I think maybe underlying that is this idea that the complexity of human understanding can be well served by the artificial intelligence applications if we approach it in the right way with a sense of kind of curiosity and careful understanding of what our inclinations might be against whether we're looking for the data to confirm what we already believe or whether we're looking at the data afresh to see what can be understood. Qasim, I wonder if you could, and potentially Bobby, you could help us with a question about, first on the technology side, do we see this artificial intelligence and our understanding of what it provides moving out to the edge sensors? And then maybe, Bobby, if you could comment on whether or not you think there is the kind of object-based intelligence ontologies. There's a concern in the audience about whether this would be shared across our intelligence community and whether these differing ontologies might prevent the sharing of information and understanding. Any thoughts on that, Qasim or Bobby?
Yeah, I can start, Bobby, if you don't mind. Technology-wise, we're really very advanced, definitely. Our sensing technology, whether space-based or aerial, it is way ahead of us on our capability to mine and make use of the data. We have a tremendous amount of data, but what is lacking really is the tools, definitely, to deal with the data, is what I call also the arts of the science is there, and the technology and sensor. We have beautiful data. If you look at the LiDAR and laser and the radar microwave, it's amazing resolution we are getting, even from satellite. But I think what we need to focus on the arts, building it, whether the bias is an issue,
sure,
whether the cultural issue. And the good example, while I was doing reading for this panel, our experience in Afghanistan, somebody wrote about, our analysts were looking to see the movement of Taliban, between, we know
right,
they're doing things and moving, but we exhaust all our means to find them because we're looking at, like, if somebody in armored vehicle we're looking for, until later somebody brought up, let's focus on the goat's trail, and where the shepherds goes back and forth on a daily, and that's where they were hiding, for example.
Wow.
When they focus on that, they start bulking them up one by one on that area, definitely. So I think that's the things we need to bring to the equation, not the technology and sensor as much as the art of using this data and mining it.
Oh, that's wonderful. So you feel like the amount of data, the sensors, that piece of the puzzle for us as we move forward is in place. It's really focused on now how these applications and our workflow and the value creation process unfolds.
Absolutely. We're not short on data, definitely.
Great.
And go ahead, Bobby.
Bobby, any thoughts on that?
Right, and so picking up on that particular theme, this is also about how do we push forward, how do we advance the state of our human intelligence such that it envelops not just the issue of what we've often referred to as interdisciplinary, but what I call transdisciplinary, such that we understand that in order to fully understand the wealth of data that we're living with, not just that which is sensed from the visible sensors, but that which comes from a variety of sensors, the human sensors, the Internet of Things. How, in fact, do we, in fact, incorporate and integrate that information such that as technology advances, which we expect it to, which we encourage it to, that it is addressing the questions as well as it can without losing sight of that part of it that is the human contribution. I recall when the commercial imagery became more and more available and certainly capable in terms of resolution for a group of analysts, imagery analysts, to come visit my office one day. There was a group, there was probably 5 or 6 of them that were there, and they were very concerned because of the armchair individuals who claimed to be imagery analysts who were being interviewed by various TV media. And they said to me, "What are you going to do about this? How are you going to stop those individuals from saying what they're saying and doing what they're doing?" And the answer was not, how was I going to stop that, but how were they going to stop that? How were they going to become the best imagery and geospatial analysts, in fact, to be able to address the most pressing problems that we have facing ourselves? One of the things that I've learned, of course, as I've continued since that retirement from NGA, working out in a variety of other domains and learning ever so much more about what's available. For a long time, sitting inside the agency, we tend to be rather smug about the access that we had to sensor data. Since that time, I have become ever so much more aware of the value of things like Landsat. So, not good resolution, but remarkable in terms of the impact that it has had upon the world dynamics. So that's not just security, that's not just warfare, that's about agriculture, it's about the health of the world, it's about the environment. So there are a whole variety of things here that are, let's use the technology to push the advances as far as we can and continue to improve it, but never forget that we have to also enhance the human participation and always be a little skeptical about machine learning and artificial intelligence, because it's that skepticism that will in fact encourage us to continue to think about what isn't known. I asked a question, and this is a rhetorical question, and I don't expect anyone to particularly answer it, but if you look at the title, Algorithms and Metaphor, are metaphors just fuzzy algorithms?
Well, listen, it's a great segue. I think if I summarize now, the panel is putting the challenge back on our operators and analysts, not to rely on the technology, but to evolve and to bring the disciplines that really intelligence requires, an understanding of culture and society and the frameworks in which human intent can be discovered, that it's not an immediate panacea, the arrival of these artificial intelligence algorithms. I want to be a little provocative, though, and I wonder if each of you could help me about this question on our adversaries' use of artificial intelligence. If we could potentially, Rennie, with your background in China, you could maybe lead off. It's clear that China, as a near-peer adversary, is operationalizing artificial intelligence. And the question I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts on is, are our values, our Western liberal values, holding us back? Or is it the thing that's protecting us in the use of artificial intelligence? I'd love to hear each of your thoughts. We understand these technologies are very advanced, and as humans, we have to, move forward in our tradecraft and understanding, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on both the strategic competition that's unfolding with artificial intelligence and potentially any comments on the very values that ground us in our work in intelligence and in the national security environment, and whether those are strengths or potential weaknesses. Rennie?
I'll start, and to start on the values side especially, and I'll start by saying that when I first lived in China, this is 1999, I was struck by how many people at all ages were learning English. In fact, I wanted to learn Chinese, and it was very difficult to find a partner to speak Chinese with because everybody wanted to learn English. It was extremely competitive. It was almost like every day was a struggle to find somebody to get a word in edgewise in their language. And that was a metaphor for China and China's approach to competition in the world. It was focused on the United States. And this is back in 1999. China has been competing with the United States for at least a generation. And it doesn't necessarily have to be benign or malevolent. Certainly, meanings can change over time, but the competition has been there. Now, what does this mean in terms of values? One of the reasons that competition has been happening in China for such a long time is that there's a much stronger top-down approach to things like national strategy. And it's a little different in the United States. The United States is slower to have this top-down national response in some ways and in some examples, I think. And that's in part because of US values of how government should work and what government should do, and that it should have input from the electorate. And so this type of grassroots input and transparency is something that ultimately, I think, can very much help the United States in its competition with China, and especially with AI. If we can take the results of our work with AI ML applications and spread them within our community so that more and more people can access them and contribute to them, this helps with transparency, it helps with developing meaning, and ultimately, that is not an approach that all of our adversaries take. And so I think that's an advantage for the United States.
Okay, Rennie says advantage United States. Matt, any comments about China and about your concerns, if there are concerns about their operationalization?
Yeah, quickly. So here's an approach to China, the quantitative approach. We're all comfortable with that, where we're going out and we're trying to extract relevance out of things we can count and observe, and that's important. Capabilities, weapons programs, trajectories of weapons programs, and America are tailor-made to go after that one. Over here, we have a nation that views itself as the Middle Kingdom, which represents a view that goes back some thousands of years, a little bit longer than the United States has existed, that the superior way, the superior philosophy will attract the lesser ones around it. But the last 100, 150 years have been consistent with that self-perception. 100 plus years, the Chinese themselves talk about the century of humiliation, 100 plus years of 2 opium wars imposed on them, then brutal Japanese occupation that went on forever. Meanwhile, the West, not the Middle Kingdom, is greatly moving ahead of China, the Middle Kingdom, science, technology, economically. Without understanding that part, what meaning and insights might you miss if you're just looking at the stuff we can get our hands on through our sophisticated tools? A lot. It helps you understand just how committed this leader we have in China is right now to, after that century of humiliation, it's our time. And so that factors in to what these make. I want to finish on something that, Rennie, you said that I think is as important as anything that's going to come out of my mouth. For those of you who are skilled in the technical stuff, if you can figure out ways to lift those findings up and make them accessible to a broader base of experts and thinkers. Why do you put a cultural anthropologist and a data scientist in the same room? Because the data scientist is sort of saying, man, this is cool beans, I'm breaking some new ground. I'm advancing the ability for us to anticipate and manipulate human and machine behavior. That's cool beans. If the cultural anthropologist doesn't see any of that, doesn't understand it at any level, the cultural anthropologist is unarmed to step in and say, that's cool beans. Can I talk to you a little bit about some of the implications that's going to have for our society in 10 or 15 years? Anyway, so I wanted to jump on that, Rennie, because I just think that's, there's a specific thing to extract out of here. Figure out how to take those findings and make them accessible to a wider range of folks that can look at it and say, hey, might be missing something here.
Okay, we got a lightning round. We must have struck a chord. I've got more questions that we can possibly answer. So I'm going to start with Qasim. Qasim, can you help us understand how close we are to general AI? A number of our audience is concerned about potentially the development of digital intuition in the way that we've described it, understanding from experience. From your perspective as a scientist that's been in this space and understanding what sensors can do, is generalized AI and the ability of AI to kind of develop an understanding on the near horizon, on the far horizon? What would you say? I understand where we are now is more narrowly tailored AI. Any thoughts about whether people's jobs in the next 10 to 12 years, or do you see these brilliant analysts and operators, as I think Rennie and Matt have implied, kind of transforming to higher level work as the capabilities improve technology?
Yeah, I don't really think you can separate AI from the human intelligence.
Great.
Input to it. That's always the case. And I teach a course at Penn State on drones and automation. And one of the assignments for them is, do you think automation will, for the drones,
Sure.
to make it fully autonomous, you know?
Right.
So the answer always, not in the near future, we're gonna see that. Right. No matter how you automate the technology, right, you're gonna have a role for the human there.
Beautiful.
So absolutely, we are very advanced in the AI, but there is a lot of work need to be done. But it cannot be done with the human interaction and input to it, definitely.
Wonderful.
That's the case with all the automation, driving cars, autonomous drones, or whatever we have around.
So very reassuring for those of you who sent me questions about whether you're going to be AI'd out of an opportunity to help protect the nation. The answer from one of our leading scientists is no. This beautiful technology will always require human understanding for contextualization in the way that we need to understand the world so that we can act. That's very reassuring. Thank you. Bobby, I wonder if you could share a couple thoughts on whether there are any important geospatial issues from your perspective, deep history in geospatial intelligence. As you think about now what we're talking about with human and machine teaming, are there any other issues that you think are evolving or unfolding for the National Geospatial Agency, but in particular, just based on a couple of these questions, massive amounts of data, more and more data. I think Dr. Mott mentioned more and more data coming in every day. Any other issues that you think needs to be addressed regarding our ability to kind of capture the power of this?
Yeah, well, and I think an issue that we particularly discuss here in the St. Louis area when the SLAG, as Tara referred to, when we get together as a meeting, one of the things that we're greatly focused upon is actually training that next generation. I mean, that's really critical. How are we preparing, and by preparing I mean down at the kindergarten, maybe even pre-kindergarten level, individuals who in fact will move through their education and then fill those positions of human analysts as we go into the future. I mean, one of the things you have to keep in mind with respect to the artificial intelligence and the fact that we've today had the ability to talk about drawing or understanding, we shouldn't draw the line, but understanding the line between where artificial intelligence helps and where the human intelligence is required, is to keep in mind that AI continues to be more sophisticated. We talk about metaphors, so think about what we mean when we say smoke and mirrors. Think about when we say wave a magic wand. Those are metaphors. Machines today with machine learning are being taught to better understand the use of human metaphors so that in fact they can begin to contribute that in terms of what happens on the technology side. One of the things that is very difficult to teach the computers is values and ethics and morals. And never forget that that's a key piece to how we make decisions as human beings. So I think, paying close attention to that education, that training of our young people as they move into this next generation. I've watched multiple generations, both of the human beings going through the process and the evolution of the technology. So I have great confidence in the future.
That's very optimistic. That's wonderful. I'd like to just do a quick lightning round. We only got a couple minutes left. I don't see our timer up on the stage here, so we'll have to keep a close eye on the time here. But I'd like to know briefly from each of you, does the advent of these operationalized artificial intelligence, let's assume Qasim is right, and I believe he is, that it's very narrowly tailored and that human tradecraft and human understanding will continue to be elevated and accelerated. Does it bring the world closer together, do you think, if I could, from each of you, or do you think it potentially presents a chance for us to be further polarized? Qasim?
I think it will help us to come together, definitely. I mean, especially if we deal with it the right way, with the societal information, with the cultural information. If we make a hybrid approach between AI and the cultural, I think it will bring us together and prevent some conflict, definitely, around us.
Wonderful. Rennie?
I agree, and I think the issue is not the technology itself causing polarization, but rather polarization and breakup as a background variable that could be affecting things. And so improving that and marrying a more unified approach to culture and strategy with AI ML applications would be a good thing.
Great. Matt?
Yeah, I think the potential is closer. You know, the insights that are available through these tools are stunning, striking. I guess it's the broader base of orientation to, is this just going to be a competitive, you know, who can get ahead? If it's a, you know, I think the coming together needs to be, you know, broadening the base of discussion about what the tools can deliver.
Okay, and that gives me an opportunity to kind of make a closing statement from my perspective about a long essay, small book that I read as I was wandering the campus of St. Louis University working on my master's degree in philosophy. So I have a technical degree in geodetic science from WashU, but I have a graduate degree on the liberal side of the house in philosophy. This essay was by a French Jesuit whose name is Dr. Pierre Chardin. And in his work called The Phenomenon of Man, he writes that he's describing a process that leads to increasing complexity, culminating in the unification of consciousness. This wasn't written yesterday. He actually drafted this back in the 30s. And the first publication of The Phenomenon of Man was in 1955. I didn't read it in 55, but at any rate, it's kind of what we're talking about here. This is advancing, and it's advancing us in a positive way.
Well, it's a wonderful way to close with the affirmation from the panel that there's real spectacular potential. The questions range from Afghanistan to Facebook, and we have a number of things, obviously, that the panel has discussed that are very topical to what's unfolding even today, with testimony on the Hill about Facebook as a company and its use of algorithms and its use of potential bias in the application of those algorithms. And so I want to thank the panel today. Some of them will be around for the remainder of the conference, but I hope that we'll be able to kind of take the conversation and the questions that you've posited for us a little bit deeper. If I just briefly summarize, it seems as if there is a deep optimism about the potential for artificial intelligence, crafted the right way with a deeper understanding of, informed by our values, but a deeper understanding of the contextual elements that will allow us to kind of very carefully and thoughtfully, more precisely and more decisively understand the world around us, which is exactly what intelligence has to do if our nation is to continue to thrive. Well, thank you all very much for the time today. Enjoy your lunch, and we look forward to seeing you later on in the conference.